Just want to extend a special welcome to some of our visitors, parents who are in town. Very special welcome. Thanks for letting your kids be a part of our lives, and it's great to be a part of their lives too. Also, a special welcome to any first-timers who are here or anybody who's returning to our community. We love having you here. Just so glad that you're here. A couple years ago, made a really big blunder in my previous assignment when I was pastor of a parish in South City. I opened up the doors for the Holy Day, January 1st, and, not that I had been out all night or anything like that, but I was a little tired, and, just unlocking the doors, I had my slippers on. I've not worn the slippers much here. I've, kind of cut that habit out of just trotting along in the slippers around the CSC. But I'm unlocking the church and just making sure everything's good. And then my bad habit was I would make a coffee and go back upstairs into my recliner and just sit there for a little bit. And sometimes there'd be coffee all over me. Other times I'd be oversleep or something like that. This day in particular, I'm just sitting there. I'm waking up slowly, new year, kind of thinking about resolutions. And out of the corner of my eye, I see somebody down the hall. I lived alone at the time. And I wasn't really pleased to see somebody there who maybe you could call an intruder at 8:05 on New Year's Day. I was just a little nervous about what that interaction would be. And I think that sometimes thinking about that reflection, I've thought about the other ways in my life about how I have willingly just let things into my life, whether it's what I ingest, whether it's what I look at or listen to, whether it's something that maybe I'll speak out and be able to have a conversation that's not something that's going to be helpful. I think that all the time we do these things, and maybe we're not perhaps aware of what it is that we're letting into the gate, what it is that we're letting into the sheepfold, what it is that we're letting into our hearts. I feel like as followers of Jesus, we have to be more attentive to that. If you're driving in and you're listening to Bad to the Bone, okay, maybe think about that. Do I really want to be bad to the bone? What are the implications of that, okay? Is it George Thorogood, right? Okay, yeah. Not that I'm just, panning George Thorogood. He's a son of God, right? That's great. But to think about what it is that I'm just letting into my life. Sometimes there's a reflection from Gregory the Great. He says, and how was the priest preparing before Mass? And I'm just thinking of myself being like, gotta hurry, shave, maybe not really prepared in a way of welcoming the Lord to have total access to my heart. On Friday, we had a very nice concert. It was not George Thorogood. It was Kid Laroi. Yeah, am I saying that right? Kid Laroi? Yeah? Was it okay, Rosa? Yeah? He did all right. A couple of openers. I would have liked to have seen the student act. But on campus, there was an event called WILD, which stands for, this is not my phrasing, Walk In, Lay Down. Yes, WashU, a number of years has had the WILD concert. Maddie's like, yep, it's awesome, love it. But Walk In, Lay Down, beforehand, a couple of days before, all of the students get their wristbands. Anybody still wearing their wristband? Ben, you took yours off? Okay, good. But the wristbands a couple days before, does somebody have one on? No? Yes? Okay, we got a wristband on, great. But why? Because the security is so tight, where I think beginning Wednesday, you get the wristband and you're told you're not allowed to take this off because you're not allowed to slip it off and sell it or give it to somebody who's not a student. They want to make sure that WashU students are the ones that are in there. They want to make sure that everyone's going to have a good time. WashU does a good job of making the parameters all kind of roped off and make sure that everybody's safe. And I appreciate that as their priest. I want to be able to know that whatever wild is happening, that at least it's done in this sheepfold. That at least Woo PD, WashU Police Department, is there, that at least there's all these signs saying, hey, here's how we can be safe and have a good time with Kid Laroi, and to recognize that we don't have to be bad to the bone all the time. I think even in a non-Christian context, we're being reminded by WILD and WashU that it's important to have parameters. And so I ask you, what does it mean to have an abundant life with Jesus? To have an abundant life with Jesus means that I allow him to be the one that decides who gets access to my heart. That maybe the voice of that relative who's saying some things that aren't really life-giving, even though they're well in the grave, maybe that person doesn't get to be the gate. Maybe that person who said this about you, whether it was a professor or whether it was a coworker or whether it was an employer, maybe that person doesn't get total access and doesn't get to be the gate. Maybe that thing that happened long ago, Jesus longs to be reconciled with you, to wash away that sin, and doesn't want it to be the defining characteristic of your heart. No, you got to have a wristband to get into my heart. And Jesus is the one who's the bodyguard. What's the bodyguard? Bouncer, thank you. Sorry. Yeah. Cup 2 of coffee was like half consumed. But recognizing that I need to be more aware of that as a follower of Jesus. And this isn't a wagging finger, okay? This is more of an invitation to think about what it is to be a Christian, to what it is to be somebody who's willingly allowing Jesus to be the one who died and rose for me. Tough words from Peter, both in Acts of the Apostles and in the first reading, or the second reading, which is Acts of the Apostles was the first one. He says, Jesus, whom you crucified, which I wish Peter would have said in parentheses, me too, because there's all of us knowing that we, through our sins, have allowed all of these wolves to come in the sheepfold. And Jesus, the Good Shepherd, comes in and he battles with them. He casts them out. And he's willing to die this gruesome death so that you might live forever. But he doesn't want us to just continue to leave the doors unlocked and just let any intruder walk on in all the way upstairs to the second floor of the rectory. He wants us to remember that he's given us a conscience and he's given us the deciding between good and bad, that he wants us to be more discerning on who it is and what it is and how it is that I live my life. I felt like that was one of the better, if not the best, Psalm 23s I've ever heard, because most of the time I hear it at funerals. And I was thinking that during the homily. It was nice to also have an additional accompaniment. So just props to you for that, because I was like, yes, it's not glum now. There's a sorrow in that song, because what is it? It's a cry of the heart. You have made me a banquet of love in the place of hatred. Wow, yet, Lord, you have set all of this before me because you love me. You want me to live as a resurrected person. You want me to live in newness of life. Am I willing to take the opportunity to live that with my whole part, whole life, whole self? It's going to require some work on your part. WashU students, final week of class just finished. A lot of papers and tests still done. Maybe the internship isn't as down pat as I'd like. Maybe I'm moving away from this place, which has been a home for 4 or more years. Maybe, whatever the particular circumstances are, maybe you need Jesus to shepherd you through those times. Maybe if you're not a student and you're going through some sickness of relatives or friends, maybe you see the news and you just feel so disheartened. Jesus, I want you to be my shepherd. I want you to shepherd me. What does that mean for my life? And then in that way, you get to see Jesus at work in all the different ways. You get to see Jesus taking control because you're allowing him to, right? You get to see Jesus pointing out these things. He's like, maybe we shouldn't have that. Or, hey, maybe we should be doing more of this. Hey, maybe that remote does have an off button. Jesus isn't as sarcastic as I am, but sometimes he'll leave those little things in. I want to end with this. Pope Francis had a 3-part image which was striking to me of how a shepherd leads. He says a shepherd is always out in front of the pack. We hear in the gospel how you know his voice, how they don't listen to the others because they're more discerning because they know that the shepherd is caring for them. I feel like Pope Francis and Pope Leo in his own way, and our other leaders, and I would even say the leaders of families, the leaders that are good, leaders of businesses and other volunteer organizations, they're out front. They're out front and they're looking, they're anticipating what's going to happen. Okay, here are the storm clouds that are coming on Monday. Great. We're going to make sure that we're aware of that. A shepherd is anticipating, okay, this is usually where the wolves are. This is usually when my family might get stressed out, because it's the end of the semester, etc. And they start interceding. Parents, to start interceding for your kids more and more. You care for them, but to make intentional prayers about it. The shepherd's always out front, Pope Francis says. But the shepherd also, and this is, I think, what we remember. What does Pope Francis say that the shepherd does? He should smell like the sheep. Do you remember this? He said this all the time. And my first response was, ew. I don't want to smell like freshmen. But there's a part of it that's true in recognizing just how important it is that we need to be right in the middle of all of the people that God has entrusted to us to care for. Think about the people that you care for. Maybe they're your suite mates. Maybe they're your neighbors. Maybe they're your relatives who are distant, but maybe shouldn't be as much. How is it that you can be right in the middle of that pack and discern with Jesus how it is that God has entrusted it to you to take care of them? I think we just, as we come alive in the Easter season, need to be more and more aware of being right in the middle of the pack, right in the middle of being able to guide them and not to feel uncomfortable about saying, hey, maybe you shouldn't be doing that. And maybe they might not like it. The sheep probably didn't like being corralled all the time. But to know that out of love, you're helping people get to where they need to go. And then the last part is this. Pope Francis says that the shepherd needs to be from behind. And he needs to lead in that way too, and to be able to oversee everything, and to be able to look for those that might be a little bit behind. Maybe because of some injury, maybe because they're trapped in something, whether it was their fault or not. And that the good shepherd always goes after that one and always lifts it up and puts it on his shoulders. How is it that you, especially because you belong to this community, might be able to look for some of those sheep who are a little bit behind? And how is it through your kindness and through your love and through your prayers and through your invitation that they might find a home here? That they might be able to be welcomed into the sheepfold, and maybe the wolves just don't get to speak as much into their lives anymore. How can we take Pope Francis's message and the image that he gives clearly of being forward and interceding, in the middle by accompanying people and being right where they are, and then also looking for those that might be a little bit behind and bringing them up to the rest of us? How might we allow that to fold into our lives? I think that's how we have an abundant life, and that's what Jesus is getting at. And I think that starting by opening and closing that gate with Jesus and not just letting anybody in will really be the way where we'll find fulfillment in this life. I said to the gentleman who had made his way up to my bedroom, I said, "Hi, how are you? Let's go downstairs." And I very, very nicely had my hand on his back. He's like, "Don't touch me." And I'm like, okay. But I wanted to say, "You're in my house. Like, get out." And then once we got outside, and I bolted the door very quickly and then ran and locked the rest of the church, I recognized that I didn't need to be as afraid if I had done the work up front in securing the gate. And I think that Jesus wants you to feel secure in that he's going to help you secure it. But we don't just let anybody into our hearts. We don't just let anything reside there.